And you said in the description, and you said here as well, is that this is a book you've written specifically for reluctant readers. So I'm always curious, what are the best ways to write books for reluctant readers and to overcome that initial reluctance and get them interested?
Yeah, so I have a couple ideas about it. I think for me, I didn't set out to write a book for reluctant readers. I wasn't even aware of the term reluctant reader when I started writing. I just wrote a book that I wrote it specifically, for when I was 10 years old. And just thinking through every step of the way. There's not a lot of description in it because I didn't care for a lot of description when I was 10 years old. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of cliffhangers because that's what I liked when I was 10 years old. And so it turns out I liked a lot of the same things that reluctant readers like. So I got that feedback from, parents and teachers and in reviews and things like that. And so looking back at it, some of the things that I do is, I just naturally keep the chapters pretty short. So the chapters are about 1,000 words each. We got a lot of feedback that's, a good range for bedtime stories, kids that are maybe even 6, 7 years old and their parents read to them before bed. It's a good 10 minutes read aloud in class and things like that. So that 10-minute, 1,000 words works for me, for reluctant readers. One of the biggest things I think is just something that kids are interested in. And, I think for most reluctant readers, if you give them a book, and it's a good book, they'll probably like it. But, it's just that initial, like, ew, a book, right? And so I just think that having a video game in there kind of gets them. And then the first chapter, there's a lot of humor to kind of take them off guard. And so, like I said, it's just things that I liked when I was a kid, and it's 1,000-word chapters. There's like 20 of them, and almost every one of them has a cliffhanger. And I don't know, maybe that's not that artful of a thing to do, but I just know that I liked it when I was 10 years old. And, it's and it seems to connect well with those types of readers. So that kind of thing, just naturally the way I write, I don't use a lot of big words. And long sentences and things like that. And so, just the language, there's not a big barrier there. So I just think that, keeping that focus on me when I was a kid, it just naturally connects with those kind of readers. And fortunately, I'm into the same kind of things that they are.
Perfect. That makes life easy when you're naturally interested. So to get really nerdy really early,
Yeah.
with language and vocabulary, how do you screen to make sure that your vocabulary is age appropriate, that it's going to be easy to read for your target audience?
I don't have any way that I don't use tools or anything like that. My books, the Trapped in a Video Game books, are in Accelerated Reader Program, and so it gets a Lexile score through that. And the score is generally around 4th grade, late 3rd grade, early 4th grade. And that's just, I don't know, I think that's just generally how I write. I'll go through my books and sometimes I'll go back and see language I'll use where I'll say, okay, I can use a simpler word there. But just naturally, the way that I edit and write is using those shorter words and easier to understand words rather than a long 50-cent word. So that generally, I might have to go back and change a couple things when I'm reading through and catch a couple things, but generally, it's in that 4th grade level, and that's just the way that I write usually.
Brilliant. And let's stay nerdy for a minute. Do you have a specific sort of guideline for a cutoff on how many words per sentence, how many sentences per paragraph, or is it just by eye, kind of you've got a feel for what you want and go from there?
Yeah, definitely by eye. I mean, I do, if I see big paragraphs, that's a little bit of a red flag to me. And so I go back through that paragraph, and it's got to be a really interesting paragraph to be that long. And so it's laid out on a page. I see, I write in Scrivener, and in there, it's a little bit harder to tell how long things are because of the size of the page. But, when you see it on an actual page, sometimes I go back and I'm like, ooh, that's long, and see if I can break it up. Generally, I'm writing a lot of dialogue in there. And so that's real short, going back and forth. But in the long paragraphs, a lot of times it's an observation or maybe a jokey thing, and I'm okay keeping that long. But if it's a long description or a long something else, that's a little bit of a red flag to me to kind of go back and look at it see if there's some way that we can maybe chop that up a little bit. And again, it's not something that I look too far into, because if I'm reading through the story and it's something that's really engaging, I don't think that kids care that much if it's a long paragraph. They're not going to get too scared away. But especially at the beginning of the book, to try to stay away from that.
That makes sense. Got to make sure you've got them fully hooked, and then maybe drop a longer sentence or two in there.
Absolutely.